Thanks, Jonathan. First of all, thanks everybody who's watching. We really appreciate you guys coming on here and talking with us. The first kind of section I want to bring up is, the actual running of a law firm. I think a lot of associates kind of don't see the behind the scenes stuff that goes on. And so the first question I think a lot of people have had is, what's the hardest part, I guess, of managing a firm? Is it making sure all the associates are where they need to be? Is it paperwork? Kind of, what do you guys think is the hardest thing of managing?
There must be nothing hard about it.
We got an administrator with us, and I'm sure she has her perspective. From my perspective, it depends on what role you play in the law firm, because each of us has a role that we end up playing and participating in, and responsibilities come along the way as we develop into partners or become partners, or even if we're laterally hired, responsibilities are put onto us. And so the hardest thing for each of us would be within whatever our roles and responsibilities are. For me, it's a hard thing, not maybe the hardest, but is to keep all the partners communicating, because that probably is the easiest thing to let go, is communication. And communication binds us all and makes us into a firm and makes our partnership work, because we're then all on the same page. And so to me, it's communication.
Okay. Cindy, what do you think?
Well, all right. So from a office administrator perspective, I definitely would say the employee relations piece of it is probably the most difficult. And so you're taking the balance of staffing issues, whether it be attendance or one staff being more overworked than another. So balancing the work perspective, because at the end of the day, it's about supporting the attorneys and the partners for a good resolve, which then turns into revenue generation and a successful law firm.
Okay.
I'd just follow up on from Wayne's standpoint about what roles. I think from the role I've played in our firm, I think the hardest part is actually a little earlier. It's getting the right people on the bus. There's the book Good to Great, and that was one of the points made in that book, that the key to successful businesses is getting the right people on the bus. And so I think that, plus anticipating what's coming around the corner in the next 2 to 4 year time frame that we can't see now, trying to anticipate that and developing strategies for the headwinds that we can't really see, and then getting buy-in across the board on implementing those strategies. So again, as Wayne said, the hard part comes from what role you play, but that's the role I play a lot in our firm, and I think that's the toughest thing to do.
I'll add something here too, from the perspective of a small firm like ours. Communication might not be quite as challenging, just because my law partner's office is directly across the hall. I can communicate by just like shouting at him, and that's pretty much it. We're a 4-lawyer office, 3.5, I suppose, if you count John Eldridge, because he keeps threatening to retire and not, and he's up counsel, and then he's here every day, and so we're a small office. So communication, though, is still a key, like Wayne mentioned. But I would say for us, just it's kind of like the idea of taking your vitamins. You need to take them because they're good for you, and that's important. But you just taking your medicine in this context is running your business. So for me, as we're a small litigation-oriented law firm, we have the demands, like all of us, of business development, management, and working with our clients, but also making ourselves focus and do the things that we need to do to run the business, and making that a priority too, not just client service, but also service of your business. I mean, we both, David and I, have been law partners for 17 years now, and we both still uniformly have the, roll your eyes reaction when it's time to set a conference call with the people who manage our marketing and our website. And we know it's important. You have to do it. But it takes away time that you're practicing law. So for me, the hardest part is making yourself take your vitamins, run your business too, not just run your practice.
So I guess everyone's talking about roles. You kind of have, you do probably more roles yourself than having it spread out like we probably have in larger firms.
By necessity, yes.
Rachel, you have anything to add about the hardest part, or everyone kind of cover everything?
My hardest part is managing my partners.
Okay. So here's a question that I think a lot of the people in the new lawyer section have kind of brought up is technology use. It's difficult to implement, and it's even harder to get it used across the whole broad of all the attorneys in the office. Have you guys seen any advantages or even disadvantages from technology implementation in your practices and in the firms that you manage?
I can speak to that quickly, Chuck. So we were, knock on wood, and talk about Dale's point about trying to project into the future. Nobody would have predicted that we would be where we are right now in this pandemic, but my goodness, I'm so grateful that in the months leading up to March of this year, we had just transitioned to the use of Clio as a practice management and time management software. We had, quite literally finished importing, and it was, talk about, again, the idea of taking your vitamins and doing these things that you don't necessarily want to do, shopping the various options, the platforms, and making that change and that upgrade for us. It was such a good decision because it enabled us to have staff fully able to work from home, for us to be able to work from home, to manage our workload by using that technology. So, and I'm not a paid endorser for Clio, obviously, but we've been really happy with that. And I know there are other products out there that do that, and it makes me wonder why we waited so long to do it and to make the upgrades and to go ahead and do that. So it was really, in terms of technology, that has been something that's been very helpful for us.
So I guess people at larger firms could kind of maybe give the other side of that of, actually having to implement it. How do you get, 15, 20 attorneys to kind of move towards a task management software like Clio and time management under that instead of, taking it down another way?
I'll let you know in a couple of years.
Yeah, we haven't taken that leap yet, but it is one that we know that we need to take. And I think, Tasha, from your perspective, I think it would be a little easier from a smaller law firm perspective, where I know Wayne and Dale, you may have already moved into a client management system, and you're looking at a larger law firm, and you need to get everybody's buy-in.
It's true.
And we're going to face that challenge in our firm. We've opted to go to a new document management system, and that the implementation of that is in the coming months. So getting 25 lawyers to buy in and do the things that are necessary and to make a changeover, that's a real challenge. At least that's our perception. So we can check back in about 6 months, and maybe I'll have a better perspective for it.
Well, and maybe that's part of the question, is how do you get to the point where you're having those conversations of, is it something we need to do now, or is it something we wait for, and stuff along those lines?
I can give you my perspective on a lot of the technology. My personal view is that we should have done it yesterday. It's the process of getting from where you are to where you want to be, and it takes an investment of money, and if you don't have buy-in, it becomes a waste of money and a waste of time. And so it's balancing that. And so the timing is, and then you've got fires burning for everybody in the office. And so finding the time to commit to make it happen is a challenge. I know from our own standpoint, this has been a talking point for probably 3 years. I wish we had done it at least 2.5 years ago. But as the old saying is, it's the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time's today. So we're going to make the leap for that. But it is a challenge.
Yeah.
We feel the same way at Hodges, Doughty, and Carson. And, you know, frankly, finances dictates how fast you can go with the amount of technology you want to place in your law firm. And when you have different practice groups, it makes it more difficult. Don't you agree, Dale?
I do. I think technology can be a huge factor in improving your effective hourly rate from a business standpoint. You can pick up efficiencies and things that will make it economically very good if it worked. It can also be a huge waste of money if it doesn't get implemented and there's a buy-in. So you've got to try to make that call as to make it work. But it does. I do think that technology has given an advantage to smaller firms. I think back when we were smaller and what we had to do in the investment technology, I wish we had 30 years ago what we had now, just from our own experience. So I do think it gives some advantage to a smaller firm, and a smaller firm can make decisions quicker and have that as an advantage, I think.
Yeah, I would also say, you know, Wayne, going off of your point, not only is there different practice areas, there's different partners at different places in their practice, in their life. And to get buy-in from someone who's retiring in a year or two on a financial investment in the future can be a challenge. And getting old dogs to learn new tricks can be a challenge. And then just making the commitment to a certain program that you've never used, that you really don't have a lot of feedback. Now that I know that London Amburn's going down this road, I will certainly be following up with them in 6 months to get that feedback and use them to help us make the same transition. But it's tough to get your partners all on the same page, which is why I said managing my partners is the hardest thing about being a partner.
Yeah, definitely here it's generational.
And I think maybe some ways to bridge the generational part is to convince the older lawyers that it is a good business strategy if you can make it work. You know, I am technology challenged in many, many ways. Matter of fact, it wouldn't surprise me if a lot of the lawyers, if Chuck said Dale's philosophy on technology is to buy more typewriters. So, but philosophically, I think it is the right decision and it makes business sense. And so therefore, even though there's a lot of things I have to have help doing personally, it's the right answer for the firm, and we try to figure out some ways to make it work. And so you get buy-in, at least from my standpoint, and if you get enough critical mass within the firm, then I think that makes it easier to get buy-in and actually make it happen.
Well, we kind of talked about the hardest part. What's your guys' favorite part of kind of managing a law firm?
For me, it would be sorry, Rachel. We should have sat together. For me, it's the diverse duties, the HR, the finance, the IT, the recruiting. So for me, it's that the diverse piece. And plus, we all know, you know, attorneys are not office managers. They don't want to manage a business. They want to practice law.
And that's my favorite part. I remember when we started this pandemic, adjusting the business to meet the requirements of the pandemic and the shutdown and the lockdowns, and how you deal with the staff and how you work remotely was a huge problem. And I remember getting back to the practice of law and saying, this is great. I want to do this. This is my favorite part, because it is. It's what we've trained to do, and it's what we like to do. And if you can be successful at it, it is the most fun, and that is to practice law and not to manage the business. But you got to have a good business to back you up. You got to have the foundation there, or it doesn't work.
I would just add, from my perspective, I think seeing the firm's success and seeing the successes of lawyers is probably my favorite part. Just watching the development of the attorneys professionally and business-wise, and watching them come to the realization that it's a lot more complicated than just multiplying hours by billable dollars and then paying expenses, and it runs on its own. There's a lot of things that go into that, but to me, it's just rewarding watching the development of young lawyers that study hard, they work hard, and watch successes, and it's creating a vehicle where that success can happen, and you do it in a collaborative, the camaraderie. I think those are the intangible things to me that make at least my role very enjoyable.
I agree with all of that. We are a part of a profession, like Wayne said, and being each other's cheerleaders, especially when you have that, you've nurtured that business and that relationship that you have with your partners and your staff, and those are meaningful relationships to you. You're in there with each other when things don't go well, but there's just nothing better than when you've watched one of your colleagues work really hard and get an exceptional outcome for a client. That's just, to me, that's my favorite part.
Those are really noble answers. I was just going to say that I like that less people tell me what to do. But what I do like, and what my striving, what really motivates me, is that the firm has a name, it has a legacy. And I, as a young partner, I want to live up to that legacy. I want people to talk about Foster Arnett and talk about Jack Draper and Louis Hagood, and then someday talk about Rachel Hurt. And the only way that can happen is to not only be a good lawyer, but to keep the firm going and successful. And so that's kind of, I have a say now. I have a say at the table, and my voice is heard. And so that would be my favorite part.
Rachel, we already talk about you.
Well, I don't want it to be notorious. I want it to be good.
And I would congratulate Wayne and his firm on what you're talking about, Rachel, because I know when I started practice, there was no Hodges, no Doughty, no Carson, but there was Bob Campbell and Jack Wheeler and several others there that are now exited the scene, and you've got a third group that's coming in. So I do think a lot of congratulations go to whatever you all have done to make it third generational. We probably all have a lot to learn from that, Wayne.
We call it a renaissance recently. A rebirth, because eventually all the people you've looked up to as mentors and all the people that have mentored you retire, and hopefully they stay around and have influence and still support the business. But you step into shoes that are rather hard to fill, especially with the Bob Campbells out there that exist in all of our law firms. And so to me, you have to do what Rachel says, which is make yourself part of the firm, make the firm part of you, and continue the legacy. What a challenge, but it's a great challenge. And I enjoy introducing myself to regulatory bodies, administrative bodies, and juries as a member of Hodges, Doughty, and Carson, because it means that much to me.
Well, and that kind of leads me into the next thing I had to talk about is how do associates, I guess, get ready to fill those shoes, in down the road, whenever that may be in the firm. How do they prepare themselves? How do they make it known that that's what they want to do, is eventually step into those shoes, and kind of advice along those lines?
several years ago, we created a mentorship program at Hodges, Doughty, and Carson where a person, a senior attorney or partner, is assigned as a mentor to a new associate, and not necessarily because that associate is working with them or in their area of law. And we created kind of a book of endeavors, responsibilities, and even rules that we utilize to mentor new associates into the firm, so that they become familiar with the business of our business, how we do things at Hodges Doughty, and also how they become not only a good business person but also a good lawyer. And so it's a tremendous responsibility. The whole firm has to take it on, but if you can charge one person with making sure that things are happening with that associate, we think it helps. And I think the results show from the people I've mentored over the years, they appreciate, the effort that's put in. I could go into a lot more detail about our mentoring program, but I'm only one of a panel here today.
Yeah. What about you, Rachel? Do you have any advice for young attorneys?
I was just thinking, I'm the youngest probably new partner in the panel, and my advice was pretty simple. It was, I showed up before my mentor and I never left before he left. That's how I think I got on track to partnership. I showed that I would outwork him. But finding a niche, finding what you're good at, if the firm is lagging in technology, become the technology expert and be the one who you're the go-to for technology. Or if you're proficient at Lexis or Westlaw, get that out there that you're the most proficient one, and show that you can contribute. And if you engage in whatever you excel, it'll lead to other avenues. That's how I did it, and so it worked. And so that's what I think is show your value, not only in your billable and your lawyering, but show something that connects you to the firm and makes you invaluable to the team.
There's a book that we ask or recommend that our new lawyers read and give a copy. You can get it from the ABA. I think the title is The Curmudgeon's Practice of Law, or Guide to Practice of Law. There's a lot of truth in that book. I mean, it's written in a narrative form for the old curmudgeon lawyer, but there's a lot of truth in that. And I do think, at least from my perspective, it's a lot easier to spend mentor time and all if you have a younger attorney that is genuinely interested. They come prepared on whatever. I think Rachel's suggestion about finding an area that is their niche and being an expert in that area is good. But reliability, having deadlines met, communication, all of those things, it's a responsibility, because in some form or fashion, I think the older lawyers are going to make a judgment on how they are treated in terms of reliability, responsibility. They'll make a judgment that that's how you may interact with clients. And so the more you feel like that someone is responsible, I think the faster your trajectory is. And that would be my, I guess, observation about that.
I guess for Tasha, it's probably a little different with the smaller firm.
My trajectory was different. I became a partner because I started a firm. So
Exactly.
that was it. That was it.
But no matter where you are, there are needs. And if a young associate comes in and fills a need, just like I saw Rachel. I mean, I remember Rachel. I remember when you were a young attorney. I guess you're still a young attorney.
Yeah, the good old days.
Yeah, I do remember that. And, Rachel was so freaking smart that everybody recognized it right out of the box. But she also filled the needs at Arnett Draper, some of the needs that were there. And it's obvious that if you can find a need and fill that need, you become, you garner a role, and that role becomes you. And it's important to the firm because you've assumed it. and that makes you a part of it. Once you're a part of it, you can become a partner. It's only an NER after part.
I like that.
I just made it up.
I guess that kind of rolls us into the next kind of section I want to talk about, which is kind of the development of younger attorneys. What issues have you come across or noticed as the big issues in communicating between senior attorneys and younger attorneys? If any.
I think that there is obviously the simple answer would be that there's a generational gap between, at least in my firm, of 30 years between those at the top and those at the bottom of the partnership range, and then even 40 years between the top of the partnership range and the bottom, where our associates are. And so I think there's different styles of communication and different expectations. I think that the legal market has become so tight that when an attorney gets a job, they take it because they want the job, but they fail to appreciate the culture of the firm. And so they get into a firm, they start working for a few years or, a year or two, and the culture just doesn't fit. And this kind of talks about what Dale said about getting the right people on the bus. Don't just take a job because it's a job, take it because you fit. Are you going to want to wear a suit every day? Are you more of a golf shirt person? Do you want to have to be in at 8 or 7:30 and stay till 5? Or do you want to have flexibility? I think that the expectations fail on the very front end, like the moment the person is hired, that there's just a different meeting of the minds, and that never gets any better. And when you get the right people on the bus, the communication flows from that. They understand the expectation and they meet those expectations. But when we can't hire the right people or get a good fit, I think there's a continuous problem with communication thereafter.
And I would just encourage for anybody that's in a firm where they feel like the culture fit may be a little different. I think that's a learning opportunity. And I know that my guess is that, if the tone was right, even the most extreme case, I am glad to share whatever I view our culture is as to why we do this. It's not, and hopefully none of it's just a preference. It's because somebody likes it better, that there's a business reason or an articulable reason of why do we do this? What past experiences caused us to choose that? And it's a learning opportunity, I think, to why does a firm do this? Why do we do certain things? What past experience contributed to that? And you may or may not agree, but sometimes the communication is just understanding where the other person is coming from instead of just making an assumption that there's no basis for it. It's just an arbitrary rule or whatever that's within a particular culture.
I guess with Tasha, you guys have any younger associates in your office right now?
We do.
It's probably a little bit different than with a larger firm, the interaction and the communication there. Do you have any advice for attorneys that are in smaller firms that are kind of always with their partners, I guess, with the older partners?
And even though, and we are a smaller firm, but our associate still has that sense, I'm sure, of being pulled in different directions. My practice is very different from my law partners. All of us are very deadline driven, so that communication, that one of the things that you always hear from associates and the dialogue that comes up is, okay, I need you all to help me set priorities, and let's make sure that I understand. And that's really a conversation. I think that it is fair for associates to ask the partners to hash that out and make sure that you're not unfairly putting a newer, younger attorney into an untenable position. So I think that communication is really important, and it is also absolutely fair, I think, for a young lawyer to say, all right, here's the things on my plate right now, help me prioritize what needs to happen. Let's talk about deadlines. Let's make sure that I'm all the places I need to be and in the right order. I think that whether you're a small firm like ours or one that's larger, that conversation needs to happen. I also think, I think for me, having had, we've been really lucky in the existence of our firm. We've really only had 3 associates, because the ones that we've had have stayed with us for so long. And we've been really fortunate about that. That's just been the right people, the right culture, and it's just been a great fit. So I really just have positive experiences across the board with the associates we've worked with, including the one who's with us now. The only thing I think I would say is that can be challenging is I tend to want a response pretty quickly. If I send if I ping an associate about something, and then I'm looking for a pretty quick response, and kind of sensing, being intuitive to the tone of the partner. And I know that I communicate differently than my law partner does, but I try to be clear about that. So I think that's the only thing that I would say in terms of kind of a generational divide. I mean, and for me, this is just kind of a very specific example, but for me, I use email more frequently. I just think it's more formal. It creates, I can use that to save into a client file, make sure that there's a record of what I need. But if I text you, then that probably means there's something very specific that I need you to respond to very quickly. I'm texting you, and I don't abuse that. I try not to abuse that. But if I'm texting you, I need a response. So I think learning the communication style of the people that you work with is one of the most important things that I would say to a young attorney, making sure that you understand kind of those nuances of communication with the folks you work with.
I would agree. I think knowing the expectations, it's the unmet expectations that generally cause frustration. And so my advice to a new lawyer is, when you have a conversation with a senior lawyer, be sure you're clear on what the expectations are and not the assumption. And I will say this as a senior lawyer, a lot of times we may think we give a complete conversation about what we want. The reality of it is we generally don't. So I assume somebody's more engaged if they ask a question, when do you need this back? What's the timetable? And make sure that whatever has an expectation attached to it, that everybody's on the same page. And but I do think the response time, just understanding all of that is very important in the communication.
Oh, I'll just add to that, Dale, that I'm only a few years removed from being an associate, and even from being a first-year associate, and even now already I forget what it was like to be an associate. And so when I give an assignment, to me it's inherent, how many hours the client will pay for that, and when I need it back, and those things that are so inherent in me that sometimes I do forget to tell the associate who's doing the assignment. And then I get really frustrated when it's not timely to me.
Yeah.
And then the associate comes back and says, "Hey, I didn't know that you needed this sooner." And so that's two levels of failure. I didn't say it, and he didn't or she didn't ask. And so now we kind of have, when I give an assignment, it's how many hours are you expecting me to spend on this? When do we need it? What are you looking for? And so we kind of promptly do that every time to become a rote practice. But it was unnecessary frustration. And they were trying to do a good job and felt that they were doing it exactly how I wanted it, but because the communication wasn't there, it didn't meet the needs. And so, yeah, ask questions, be engaged, anticipate.
I guess going along with that, how can young associates make their, and I kind of have stolen this from Dale, their stock at the firm rise? I know we talked about getting a need and filling that need, but in other areas, doing outside events, does that help? How does an associate basically become part of the firm and make themselves a gear that's essential? Beyond just making sure that you're doing assignments and in a niche? Are there any things outside of that they can be doing to make themselves more part of the firm?
Well, since I know Marcia's listening, join the bar. Be active in the bar. Get your name out there in the bar. I think is so important to know your peers and your colleagues, to have relationships with them. I think is so important, and it has been a huge trajectory in my practice and my stock in the firm. I did things in the KBA that my firm took recognition of that wasn't a billable hour. And so I think that's critically important and invaluable. And the other thing that we take note of, what partners send around to other partners routinely when it happens, is when an associate gets a compliment from a client, whether it's a claim rep, whether it's an individual person, whether it's, you know, someone who just gave a deposition, but they send back a compliment. That tells us that even when you're not around us and you're not with us, but you're out representing the firm, you're doing a good job. And that's what we pay attention to.
When I was a young associate, it was important. It was a component of being a part of Hodges, Doughty, and Carson that we do community work. And I chose to do community work that interfaced with my interests. And so before I was a lawyer, I worked in the speech and hearing sciences field and worked with deaf children. And I continued working with the deaf, and I continue working with the deaf to this day after 33 years of practice. And I must note that you spend so much time with your profession that you should do something that you like, that you enjoy, that you love. And it brings so many rewards over time that it shows how important it is to you. So do what you think, do what you feel is good, work in the community in the areas that you like and that you really want to involve yourself. It's really going to pay you back.
I think people, by and large, do a much better job in areas that they are truly interested in and enthusiastic about. So if I was a new lawyer, I would probably go to, you know, somebody like Rachel, Tasha, Wayne, and say, you know, here are areas that I have a real interest in. Do any of those, can any of those be utilized on behalf of the firm or what we're doing? And if there's other areas, what would they be? And so did you get an interest there? I think that way you can channel, and a new lawyer is not going to know what the overall objectives of the firm and a lot of the things that are issues, but I think a willingness as a senior lawyer, you won't intuitively know what are the strengths, the items of areas of enthusiasm, and all of younger lawyers. We have to learn that. And I think that dialogue early demonstrates an interest and enthusiasm, and that's going to make a more senior lawyer a lot more receptive or interested, I think, in the new lawyer to do that.
Tasha, do you have anything to add on to that?
Well, I was just thinking about that. I like Dale's word intuitive. I think being intuitive also about anticipating what one of the partners might need. If you've done something with that partner a number of times, I'm always so excited when an associate does something without having to be asked. They just know, they intuit what needs to happen, and it's done. That is, you know, that makes my day. That makes my day. And it doesn't even have to be something huge. And I'm not talking about reinventing the wheel or going out on a limb and doing something outside of your comfort zone. Just literally saying, okay, this is the way we do things. I'm not going to wait to be told to do it. I'm just going to do it. That is remarkably helpful and impressive to me.
Taking that initiative and getting it done.
Absolutely.
I think anything you can do as a young lawyer to save time for a partner in your firm is going to be extraordinarily appreciated, and your internal market is going to grow exponentially if whatever it is. So it's like, again, I liken back to a business deal, but the senior lawyer is your market. And so you're studying, what do they do? What do I service to them? How do I meet their needs? And the more satisfied they become, the more your internal market is going to grow. And saving time is really high on the list.
Well, How about when an associate makes a mistake? Kind of what's the best way to approach the partner and kind of say, hey, look, I messed up, and kind of that everything's a learning process, obviously, when you're new. But what's kind of your all's advice for approaching a partner when something bad has happened?
Be honest. Be honest, be direct, be immediate, and if possible, try to have a plan to correct, if possible. But don't sacrifice that plan, coming up with that plan to correct, with being immediate in the disclosure. That's my strongest advice. You know, there are certain deadlines. We all know this. There are certain deadlines. If they're missed, we can't come back from that. But absent those types of deadlines, if there are mistakes made, most of them, a lot of them can be repaired. But I need to know. I need you to tell me right away, and I need you to be honest and direct, and then let's talk about it and let's learn from it. We've all, like you said, we've all been there. That's what I would ask for.
I had an older colleague tell me one time, I can take a mistake. I can't take being surprised. And so you just don't want to get surprised. I would fully endorse everything that Tasha had to say. Right on the money is from my perspective.
I
Agree 100%.
My big thing is I don't like excuses, just not because they're not without merit or with merit, but this excuse isn't necessary. I just want you to come in and say, hey, I did this, and let's talk about it, let's fix it. But the excuse is great on me. We all make mistakes. It's called the practice for a reason. It's not perfection, it's the practice. But don't try to make excuses to lessen it. It is what it is. I'm a black and white person. Let's just hit it and go forward. But truth, you gotta come to me. Yeah, that's the big one.
I do think if there is a learning experience as part of that mistake and the young lawyer recognizes, and to Tasha's, this, I guess, part of it when you're saying having a solution if it's possible, I think the other thing for me is to say, I want to see a reaction of like, I am totally bothered by the fact I made a mistake. I've thought about how do I not repeat this, and I am totally embarrassed by it. The thing that grates on my nerves more is somebody says, well, I made that mistake, sorry about it. And it comes across as indifferent or flippant. Then their stock goes down, because I think that's the way they're going to handle clients of ours. So you're right. We don't have perfectionists, but I do think that anyone who aspires to perfection, even though it's not attainable, but if you aspire to it, your stock will go up in a firm.
It's showing that you care, essentially, for what
Yes.
you're working on, instead of just not worrying about it. Okay. Going along with that, what's your all's advice for young attorneys starting out to better themselves as attorneys? I know we said, like I said, finding a niche and making sure that you're learning from your mistakes, but any advice on, read these types of books, speak with the attorney that does this or something along those lines to just make yourself better at your practice?
Every responsibility that you're assigned, every project that you're giving, do your very best. Make sure that it's right, and make sure that it is the best work product that you can give, so that you show your eagerness to be a professional, to be as good a professional as you can be. And as Dale and Rachel have said, and Tasha as well, that you then own it. If you own it, whatever you own becomes part of you. And if you end up owning being part of the firm, it's going to bring you on and make you a partner. So as a first year associate, I know you're out there thinking, I don't know, the first thing about this law school really didn't teach me how to be a lawyer. That taught me how to think like a lawyer. And so then you have to learn how to be a lawyer. And that includes learning the business of wherever you're working and how they bill, how you are to bill your time, how you are to perform your function, and the responsibilities that you're given. If you do them, even if they seem menial, or small, if you do them to the best of your ability, will garner you more responsibility and more work.
Agreed. Mine's initiative. If I give you an assignment or ask you to do some research or pull something, do that assignment, do it to the best of your ability, give me excellent work. But if you see something along the way that you think would also be useful or helpful, draw it to my attention. And so that 4 months down the road, when I go, oh, hey, I have this idea, and then the associate comes back and says, oh, yeah, I saw that case when I was doing this research 4 months ago. And I want to be like, well, why didn't you tell me? Take the initiative, be a part of the solution, be a part of the team or the case or whatever it is you're working on. It really all goes back to being a part of it and owning it, but having initiative to help me, because I don't know everything either. I need you to buy in to helping me, in my case, win. I want to win, but help me have the best result for our clients.
There's another subject matter I wanted to talk about today, and that is this. I've seen young people come in, and because they are a lawyer, maybe a first-year lawyer, they think that they're better than maybe a secretary. Believe me, they're not. And secretaries that have been there for 30 years can teach you so much. And so you have to come with a little bit of humility and learn from those that have been doing it, no matter what their station is. Because you can learn so much about a docket sounding from a secretary who's fielded this kind of thing for so many years. You can learn so much about the practice of law and how to do it right from those that are around you. That's why that firm is succeeding. And that's all I got to say about that.
That's a
I would
great
agree
point.
with that, including clerks of the court.
That's right.
When I first started, it's like suck up your pride and ask them. I mean, you're the lawyer and they're not, and but it's like they know, and that's where you learn a lot of stuff is by asking. I think the other thing when you're talking about reading books and all, and this may seem a little strange, but because I do think I like Rachel's part about being an expert in reading and learning a lot in an area, but I would suggest if you have any time at all, if you don't try to make time, I would read books about sales. And, no matter how you cut it, at the end of the day, you are selling a product, and you're selling to a senior lawyer, you're selling to the staff. I mean, everybody is that. And so you can learn a lot of pointers from sales books and business books, because at the end of the day, you're trying to generate a pot for everybody, for people to live out of. And so that may seem a little strange, but I've been to where Tasha described. I know when Jim and Libba, Margaret, and I started our firm about 30 years ago, the first hire we made, we interviewed a clerk from the Court of Appeals over in Nashville. He was our first hire, but we interviewed him in an old abandoned room in the top of the Capitol building was where we interviewed. And on the way back, we were talking about whether he would accept our offer. And Jim said, well, if he doesn't, I'm going to, because, so there is a lot of mileage from that station in life when you're starting from absolute ground zero to growing, that you learn things. And so I think the people, don't want to speak for Tasha, but I'm sure you're glad to impart what you have learned along the way from the School of Hard Knocks to whoever has an interest in that. So anyway, that's my pitch for a book of sales or relationships.
Well, I think all that's been really good advice. I'm going to check if any participants have any questions. Go ahead and put them in the chat box. We're going to leave this next time open for those types of questions. While people are thinking of questions, I do have just kind of maybe a little bit of a funny question. Some associates may think that. How do you all feel about ties in the office?
I'm against them, personally. No, I think you dress for success, which is why I fit in at my firm.
I know Jim has always told me, and I agree with him to some extent, is that if you're a lawyer, you should look like a lawyer in some extent. But ties have kind of, and again, it's a little bit of a funny question, have kind of not always represented lawyers now, because we do so much more than just show up to court. So that's kind of just a question I've gotten from people in the new lawyers section. So I figured I'd ask you all and see your opinions on it.
I can give you my perspective in terms of like and Jim will have his, and some of it is generational thing. I think it's less of an issue the way our firm is currently structured, where most of the meetings occur in the conference room and you don't interact with where most of the attorneys on another floor. When we were in the old house, I would always worry that you didn't know sometimes at 8 o'clock in the morning when you came to work that you were going to interact with somebody, maybe a client, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And it may not be as much now, but I worried more about what the client would think of somebody that had a tie and looked like a lawyer, or whatever their perception. And so that was more the motivation, other than I just want you to look this way just arbitrarily, or I like to wear ties and so therefore everybody's going to wear ties. That never was the motivation. It was more the fear that you would interact unexpectedly with clients, or you'd have to go to the court. I'm trying to remember a funny story in our firm, and I can't remember the lawyer, so I don't want to embarrass, but they had not worn a coat or a tie, and they got a call and had to go down to some hearing that afternoon unexpected. The court, and they were having to borrow a coat and tie that didn't fit, and it turned out to be fairly humorous. So that would be the basis, I think, at least in our culture, why if you don't wear one, you probably ought to have a shirt and a tie and a coat somewhere in the office for an emergency if you're put in a situation where you needed to look like a lawyer.
So, Dale, we even have a running joke that everybody on the back of our door, we all have ties. That was the one that was given to me. So we believe in that, because you never know what the day's going to present. But yeah, we're a firm, we're a tie and coat kind of firm, and always have been. And there's been some push on that, and I think we've let up a little bit. But you just never know. You never know what the day's going to bring, which is one thing I really like about the law.
Well, I've always felt like you're probably never going to offend a client or somebody if you have a tie on. You might if you look sloppy, and I don't think it always has to be a tie. You can look very professional without one as well. So it's more of just the appearance. So I don't know if that helps respond to what you were asking, Chuck, but that's at least my view on it.
No, I think those are really good points that a lot of maybe young associates don't understand, that it's not just because we want you to wear a tie, it's because there's some basis behind it. Well, I don't see any questions in the chat box.
You just never know what's going to affect a client. When I first got out of law school, I practiced with what was then, I thought, an older lawyer in Cookville, who's actually younger than I am now, but he had some heart issues, a sort of a larger fellow, and so the doctor told him to rest. So he told me that he had taken a nap on a couch in his office in the afternoon, and a client opened the door and walked in. He said, "Hey, I'm firing you because I don't want to have a lawyer that sleeps during the day." So you just never know how a client reacts to what. So that's the basis of that.
It's good reason to be ready.
Young
Well, you guys
associate,
go ahead.
as a young associate, I had one time a Supreme Court justice walk into my office with a partner for an introduction, and also another time a very high political figure in our state walk into my office, and I was really glad I had my tie on.
A real good reason to have one on.
I guarantee you he might not remember me, but he might remember me if I was sloppily dressed and didn't look, and I don't want to be remembered that way. That's not what I want.
Very good points. Well, do you guys have any last pieces of general advice or anything for anybody that's listening? We covered quite a bit, but I don't know if you guys had anything else you wanted to add.
I just would encourage you not to hesitate to reach out to older lawyers, whether it's in your firm or whether it's in the bar. Most people are glad to help a younger lawyer because we've all been the recipient of lawyers, both within practices and within the bar. And so I would encourage people to ask, and you'll be surprised how much receptivity you get to that.
We have a question.
Yeah, I just saw that. I was actually going to say, see if you guys can answer it pretty quick because we're running up on our time. One of the attendees asked, any advice for young attorneys looking to expand into areas of interest outside the firm's practice areas?
Have a plan. Have a plan as to why it's needed, how you're going to develop it, how you're going to make it a part of the practice, and how you're going to make it part of the firm, make it profitable. Don't just come in with an idea, come in with a plan. Don't come in with a statement, come in with a plan is what I would say. It's one thing to say, I want to do this. It's a whole nother thing to come in here and you show that you've done your research. You've shown that you have a need or a proficiency. You've shown how you're going to go about getting clients. We too often in associate committee meetings, we have, oh, I think I could do this, or, I'd really like to do this. Until you show me how you're going to do it and why you need to do it, it's really tough for me to accept it and take it on.
So there needs to be some investment on the front end before you bring it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Does anybody else have anything to add on to that?
I still think it's a business proposition. If it's an area that the firm's not doing, then the pitch is you diversify, and there's maybe some reasons to diversify as long as you don't harm your underlying business. On the other hand, unless you're planning on trying to do it all yourself, the firm's going to make some type of investment, and it may be time that you would spend in that area that you're not going to spend on other files, or it's going to be in some part. So it needs to be like a business plan. Like if you're going to the bank to get a loan, you have a business plan there. So if you have an area that's your interest, to Rachel's point, sell it as you would to a lender.
I completely agree with that. And choose your timing wisely. If you are going to approach partners who you already know have a really heavy calendar at that moment, that's not good timing to approach them and ask for, while the initiative is appreciated, it's not the right time to bring that up. So be smart about the timing and presenting the plan that Rachel just described.
And don't have any outstanding assignments you're not timely on when you're ready.
Yeah,
Know that.
right.
Also that.
Be prepared to spend extra hours developing that new book of business after you've done what you're supposed to do for your law firm and what you've been assigned to do. I brought in a zoning component to our law firm over the years, but it always dovetailed into things like construction law or property law, some of the things that we were doing. And so I haven't had an open door to do it, but by the same token, I always felt it was my second job. And lo and behold, now it's part of the firm. But in the beginning, it wasn't, and I had to do it like a second job. I took it on like a second job.
But don't just assume that your firm won't be investing in it. I know one of our areas is one of the more rewarding areas and lucrative areas from our firm that we didn't do it one time, and it was an idea, and the firm took an investment knowing that it was going to take a 3 to 5 year window of time to actually make that happen. You'd have to have complementary parts of it. I mean, it's a business piece of it. But so, you've got to make your case as to how it's beneficial financially.
Well, that's all great advice. And thank you all again so much for participating today. I think anybody that was listening got a lot of information and knowledge that's going to help them in their growth as an attorney. Again, like I said, thank you all. And this is being recorded, so it should be posted so you guys can watch it afterwards. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you.